Welcome back to 8 Cubes, and of course, welcome back to Lamby series, back on 8 Cubes for the foreseeable future. Lamby, we're going to start off talking about Esme Cuckoo, the season pass card of the upcoming new X-Men season. A 3/4 with an on reveal that copies a card in your deck, puts it in your hand, sets its cost to 3, and sets its power to 4. A pretty clear whiff on White Queen. Do we think that this will be a more successful version of White Queen?
Yeah, so I think this card is definitely going to be a better version of White Queen, simply because you really can actually build a deck around this card. That I feel like this card has a lot of potential. And I mean, I say that a lot of the time, but I do think this one has really a lot of potential, because if you build your deck to generally have stuff that is more expensive than this card, which is very easy to do, you generally get a net positive in terms of, like, you ramp, right? Instead of ramping up your mana, you just reduce the cost of the card, so you get to play it for a bit cheaper. And usually we know card effects like that are very powerful, right? Like, you turn a card from, like, let's say 6 costs into 3 costs, that's a huge discount. So I feel like there's a way to play, like, I wouldn't say like straight up all big boys in your deck, but you build your deck such that you have like some low cost, just generic good stuff, and your average cost in your deck is like 4 or higher. So every time you play Esme, it's just like a discount. Like, as long as you get to play her before turn 6, right? You play her on turn 5, whatever you draw is likely to get discounted, for example. And then you can just like cheat mana. Of course, the specific deck that she goes into, I'm not too sure yet. But I think in general, she might be a bit more splashable than I thought. I mean, 3/4 is a bit understated for a 3-drop. But if it's a 3/4 that very often turns your 4s into a 3, your 5s into a 3, your Doctor Doom or whatever into a 3, yeah, that's kind of insane. So I do think that she has a home in the meta for sure.
I think you've identified a pretty key aspect of this card to me, which is that the number that matters the most for getting her into your deck is her power and the cost of the thing that she's copying. Where it's like, you're not playing this to make a 3/4 and then another 3/4. You're playing this because you want it to be good value, and then it's going to pay you back by giving you like a 3/4 Iron Man or whatever. In terms of specific decks that this makes sense in, I think the Victoria hand type of deck with Mystique and Iron Man that was overlapping with Moonstone in that way, this could be a really good home there. Mr. Negative, this could be a really good home there. My one major worry for this card is that, like all cards that you're playing effectively for an energy cheat discount, you have a pretty fundamental weakness to Mobius here, where that 4 power, like, I think this card would be much stronger if it were, say, a 3/5 that set the cards to 3/3, because that would keep a lot of the energy cheat aspect available. You don't care about a 3/3 Iron Man versus a 3/4 Iron Man, a 3/3 Gore versus a 3/4 Gore. That's still awesome. And so this being a 3/5 with that upside, I would say that card would probably be busted. That would be like better copycat, kind of, right? Like, that'd be a very powerful card. The fact that I think that does mean that it feels like it's entirely possible that 3/4/3/4 is just like a pretty damn solid inclusion in a variety of decks. While, yes, Mr. Negative and Victoria Hand come to mind as like sort of obvious inclusions, I do kind of wonder if like maybe a Thanos deck can use something like this, or just sort of it as a generically decent card as long as you end up actually playing the thing that it copies. I don't know how true that is, but I am interested in finding out.
I just built a deck in my head after that conversation. I'm actually very excited to play this card right now, because one of my this is also gonna show my Marvel Snap age for sure. Because one of my favorite decks ever was that whole Patriot Ultron thing. Can you imagine you play this, you get like a 3 mana Ultron and then 3/3 with Patriot on
You
turn 6. You
boomer.
literally do nothing the whole game and win. Like, you literally do nothing the whole game and win.
Okay.
It's hilarious, And of course, since we mentioned Iron Man, Patriot, Ultron, by extension, Blue Marvel, it's all the same deck, KM. So, like, that's a deck. That's a deck that wins Hela-esque style, but it's not Hela, obviously.
It's a
So we'll see.
deeply boomer idea. That's like
Degenerate but strong.
it's like the equivalent of like someone running for president on the platform of like, I don't understand why these people just can't buy houses, you know? I just don't. I bought my first house for only $50,000. That's what you're doing right now.
I mean, it also can possibly dodge Killmonger, which I want to talk about later in the other topics, but yeah.
Moving on to Surge, who is the card I think I've seen the most excitement for, and she's a very intricately worded card, so apologies if I get this wrong. On reveal, give the top card of your deck +1 power and -1 cost. When you play that card, that effect happens again. Now, as far as I've been able to glean from dev answers, the way this works is that the effect is located on Surge in much the same way as if there is a Cosmo in your Firehair lane and you destroy a hood, you are not going to get that hood trigger on the Firehair. If there is a Cosmo in the Surge lane, I expect that to prevent Surge from triggering again. Similarly, if you remove the ability from Surge with something like a Red Guardian, I expect that to happen as well, and that is relevant with her 2/2 stat line. This is a card that has a lot of people exploring edge cases and figuring out what makes sense with it. I am a little lower on this card than everyone else, but I'd like to know where you're at on it.
So this card, like if you draw it on turn 2, is just the nuts, right? Like I mean, in the sense, if you draw it on turn 2, every single draw thereafter, you definitely want to play it on curve because it sort of just keeps going and going and going. But I do agree with you that the one thing that puzzles me the most about this card is the fact that I read this card 3 times and I had so many questions because like it's just like, okay, so firstly, if they actually just decided to do like, okay, so the text is on review, give the top card of your deck -1 cost and +1 power, and then they added a text that says ongoing, if you play it, repeat this ability. Obviously that's gonna be a worse card, but it makes it so much easier to understand. But yeah, so I guess based on what you're saying is that the like basically the card that gets played after Surge with her so-called effect cannot get cost mode because the effect is tagged to Surge herself. I guess that's fine. I'm actually quite high on this card simply because I'm a very big fan of Energy Cheat. But I think the difference between this one and like the one we talked about, the Esme, right, is that this one you kind of strictly have to draw it as early as possible because the effect that compounds scales with the amount of times you get to repeat it. So I would say don't really have a specific deck that I want to put this in right now, but definitely a card that I mean, if your deck plays this card, you definitely want to see it really early, and there's a lot of very good tools in the game right away. So do you really need the discount to play optimal 2-2? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, my thought process with this is, let's say
Some
like
optimal stated, but yeah.
Yeah, like what is the minimum roll here that we're okay with putting in our deck? Is 2 energy cheat and 2 points of power enough? Do I feel good about that? Because I feel like the more you have to build for her specifically, the more I get worried that you find yourself unable to play the things that this metagame is built around, which are important and powerful tech cards that happen on the last turn of the game. And I don't just mean like Shang-Chi or Enchantress, I mean like Juggernaut or whatever. If you're drawing those cards and that's where the Surge proc is, you either don't get another Surge proc or you don't get to save them. And a lot of mid-range decks are sort of right now predicated on building themselves toward those outcomes. You're setting up a situation where you have played your efficient stats, and then you have these big endgame hammers in the form of those 3 and 4 cost cards that can win lanes on their own. And it's like, I care more about having those in my deck than I do about potentially cheating energy on them. I need them to be there when I need them. I don't want to be forced into running them out there to continue a Surge chain. So, what does this actually work with? I think maybe bounce. Like, it is permanent cost reduction. So if you're hitting things that you actually want to play and replay, getting permanent cost reduction in your bounce deck feels good, but it's also at the same time like, is that actually helping you? Because when I play bounce, I feel like I end up floating energy anyway. Like, my problems with bounce are much more related to board space and total amount of power I'm able to put in an individual lane than they are to anything else. And I think that maybe there's something here with bounce if we like overload on disruption, perhaps. Like if we're like an Iceman kind of deck, that could be a direction I might want to go with bounce. But I am thinking that like if this card is playable, it is kind of only a bounce card, and I don't expect to see it in those decks that have these important hammers at 3 and 4 cost where timing really matters.
Yeah, so I think when you were talking about that, I realized something, which is I feel like when you play this card, you really want to be playing it in a deck whereby you don't really care what you draw, you are able to just slam it on the board, right? You're able to play these cards. I don't really have a specific deck other than one right now, which is I think this might be a decent surfer card, because the thing about surfer is that they run basically all trees and very little tools, right? But like, let's just say you play this on two, every tree you draw might be something that you can just slam onto the board. Or obviously, if you play as well, you get to play the Sarah on 4, that kind of thing, and then you just spam your trees thereafter. Something to consider as well.
Moving on to Hydra Stomper, who has brought back a longtime Lamby favorite, Silk, who I will be honest, I think is like the worst card in every Hydra Stomper deck. But the way the Hydra Stomper has developed as a package is Batroc, Craven, Sam Wilson, Silk, and Hydra Stomper. And Silk is definitely the worst card in that package, but you just need a second card that can move every turn for the sake of Hydra Stomper, Craven, and Batroc, right? Obviously, if you get Sam Wilson, that's way preferable to Silk in basically every situation, but we just don't have a backup Sam Wilson, so Silk ends up making it the cut. I've seen this in the Scream deck, and I do think it's important to talk about this as a hybridization with the Scream deck, rather than just like, oh, that's what the Scream deck looks like now. I think it's important because, like, Batroc is a card that's taking up space in your deck, even though I think it's probably right in Scream. Sam and Craven were already there. But adding Silk and Hydra Stomper is like committing to this. You are saying, I prefer this to, say, the Darkhawk build of Scream, right? And so it is also in that way hybridizing with the explosive Ajax deck that was already running Sam Wilson. I've seen Batroc and Hydra Stomper and Silk in there alongside a Craven as an early game power package. I've actually really liked that and how it has looked and how it has played out so far. So I think it is possible that this is like part of a 5-card power package that could end up being like not necessarily what Silky Smooth used to be, but something similar to that, and like this is a very powerful low to the ground mid-range core.
Yeah, so I think the one thing this has a bit of similarities with like the OG Silky Smooth is that at the end of the day, it's still like you mentioned, right? A 5-card power core, and then you fit some tech in it based on the meta, and then you go from there because you have these scalers, and then you have some tech for whatever's relevant in the meta. I think that's still a recipe that works. It's just that I think that this game, compared to when Silky Smooth was super relevant, it's been power crapped a lot. Like you really need a lot of points in the early game plus tech to beat some of these like powerful like tall decks, right? Like Thanos is a white plus tall deck. It does everything, right? Like this Stomper package, I personally don't think, no matter how you tech it, is gonna be like enough to beat what Thanos can do on a general basis, because it pretty much does everything, right? So I think decks are just gonna get a lot more powerful at doing whatever they're supposed to do. And like if they don't print more like baseline like early game scalar cards that like can go anywhere, then this style of gameplay might eventually phase out, which I guess is fine. We've been having like early scalars plus tech for like ever, basically. So I'm down if this whole Silky Smooth style of gameplay just phases out eventually. But for now, I guess we've got a new like set of toys to play with that has a very similar nostalgic factor to what we had in the past.
Well, to be fair, a lot of these are pretty power crept cards, right? Like Sam Wilson is part of this package.
Is, yes.
You have Batroc as part of this package, multiplying your Craven procs. Like, this is not your granddad's Silky Smooth. In fact, Silk is like the worst part of it. Like, this is a deck that is like, if you're able to curve Batroc, Sam Wilson, Craven, that's obscene. Because you're getting 2 move procs off of moving the Sam to the Craven location. Batroc gets a proc. And oh, by the way, 2 additional procs on your Hydra Stomper. Like, those are the draws that can compete with Thanos. That's just a ton of points. I think that this package is worth keeping in mind. I just wish that we had a better second enabler for it than Silk, who genuinely is awful.
Yeah, since we talked about all these power crap cards, Silk is the one that was from the past, basically. I really think that the funny thing about this deck is that one thing it's going for it right now is that I think, especially now, it does what it does really well because it literally cannot open bet. Like, it's can't, because you literally always have good cards to play on curve in the early game. So that's one thing that's good that's going for it.
Batroc the Leaper, the most relevant of the 3 Series 4 cards that released by a pretty large margin, a 1/2 that moves whenever something else moves once per turn. When you move, I move, just like that. I think I butchered those lyrics. I hope any Ludacris fans in the chat do not get mad at me. This is a card that gains 2 power every time it does that, so there's obviously a bunch of synergies, most of which we've already covered. Sam Wilson, Silk, Craven, pretty straightforward. It's an extra move for your Craven when you're moving stuff into the Craven lane. Obviously a very powerful thing to be doing. It's an extra move when you're moving your Sam Wilson shield around, which you are basically always doing. It's a 1 cost that can get up to 10 power, which you are very interested in a wide variety of decks. On the whole, nothing bad to say about this guy. Flat out good. A big part of why the package we talked about works. If he did not exist, I shudder to think at what Hydra Stomper's release actually would have been, because I think without this card, Hydra Stomper is not going to be worth putting in any of your decks.
Yeah, so this card really just reminds me of what, I mean, it's obviously a different card, but what this reminds me of is what OG Kitty Pryde was, right? Where it was that 1 drop that just was able to become easily double digits of power. And fun fact, this card does it really easily as well. So I think this card literally, this card's existence literally enables like the entire deck. Like it basically makes it so that you would even consider having like more move stuff in the deck for whatever reason. Like I don't even think the card Silk itself would even be considered if not for batroc being like that powerful of a beast at 1, right? But of course, being a 1 cost card always means that there's a chance that it dies to a Killmonger, very obviously. And the thing about Killmonger also, like, not to sidetrack too much a bit, but like it's also very relevant right now because of Thanos, you know. So
yeah.
I do think that in general, this card very strong potential nerf candidate, but I think let it cook for a little bit longer. We'll see how it goes, because it's also very obvious that it has counters too. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. But I'm glad that like they gave us an early scaler that fits into this specific shell as well.
I also think it's really interesting that there's a tension here, right? Because like you
Yeah.
want to run Killmonger to beat Thanos, but you can't because you're a Batroc deck. And I think that's actually like a pretty meaningful sacrifice right now. A brief moment just to talk about the other cards that came out, Fan, Fe, and Topaz. Topaz, first of all, one of the most ballinest animations that I've ever seen. It's so cool. Fan Fe, a little bit medium, but I think she's probably going to find a decent home. The thing that makes her awkward is just being a 4-cost activate. Topaz is a card that pushes move a pretty strong amount up, in my opinion, and the only thing that's holding her back is cost as well. We've seen how useful Madam Web is for move decks, in large part because cards like Vulture and Human Torch and Dagger are balanced around a 1-card input in order for them to get to their payoffs, and Madam Web makes it so that she's effectively, 4 move procs or whatever. Topaz is not as many move procs because she costs more. She's harder to fit into move bounce because she costs more, but a similar premise exists here where these cards are balanced around you get 1 move per card. You get a Ghost Spider, you get a Heimdall, and Topaz is, or not a Heimdall, a Ghost Spider or an Iron Fist. Heimdall actually an example of the other thing. But Topaz is saying, for cheap, I'm going to give you multiple moves per card. I find it hard to believe that's not going to be useful at some point in the future, even if it isn't right now.
Yeah, so what scares me about Topaz and Fan Fe in general is, okay, so firstly, we've already covered the problem to me. Like, the problem is these cards will be a bit more borderline unplayable for now because of their cost. But at the same time, these cards will be broken if you just reduce them by 1 cost. Like, honestly, I feel the problem with these kind of like cards, these are all Madam Web-ish style cards in a sense whereby they scale your whole deck exponentially so hard. And we obviously know what the culprits are who want to move a ton of times and become extremely huge. We know. It's just that if you make these any cheaper, these will go into that deck, and then that deck will just be the best deck again with so much player agency and so much stats. Remember Move Bounce? Yeah, that was that deck. So, like, I mean, I want these cards to be good and very playable, but at the same time, if these cards are good and very playable, we will have to like we just need to re-record the previous 8 Cubes episodes, and we will have all topics again because we'll just be talking about Move Bounce every day again. So yeah, just gotta be careful with these cards. But I do think that these cards are probably like the cost that they are and the way they are right now for a specific reason, which is they are not meant to be too broken. But now they are a little bit underplayed, right? But then again, I don't think this. I think at the end of the day, these cards are just meant to be there and then are meant to let you do some like cooking. But hopefully they don't become too broken because it's actually really very easy to make them broken.
They have extremely powerful text boxes. There's really not another way to say it. They are only balanced by their cost and their power. And it's like, these are very good text boxes, and I really hope I never have to see much of them. Thanos has, in my opinion, been the best deck basically since Goliath came out, with Strange Supreme adding another variant of Thanos to the metagame, being a big boost to the more tech-oriented version of Thanos. I gotta tell you, though, the more I keep playing with it, like, I recently went and looked at my stats with ongoing Thanos this month, and it's like, I'm like 41 and 13 or something absurd like that. Like, so obviously I feel this way, but I gotta say, I feel like ongoing Thanos is the better deck of the two, and people like the Strange Supreme version more because it's safer, because its counters are not as strong against it. They're afraid of things like Enchantress or Killmonger, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like the ongoing Thanos list is just like pretty straightforwardly extremely excellent. The fact that it gets to include Mobius and just sort of win the mirror by doing more points and then also Mobius is just like, just the icing on the cake, I think. I think it's kind of been an incredibly underrated deck for the entire 5-week season. And it's underrated to the point that I saw people putting Strange Supreme in the ongoing Thanos, where it has negative synergy. Like, to be 100% clear, negative synergy with Blue Marvel, Spectrum, Goliath, Dazzler, all that stuff, and still winning a lot. And I find that to be a testament to the power of ongoing Thanos as an archetype. I've never thought the best deck in the game was underrated before. Not that I remember. I kind of feel like that now.
So you mentioned a few things, and I want to cover, I think, at least two of them, right? So I guess the first one, we're gonna start with the less important one first. The less important one is, firstly, this is a deck that easily fits Mobius, and Mobius gets bigger, right? Because obviously it's also an ongoing card, so it fits Mobius very easily, and Mobius also has the downside of the upside of not being just a 3/3, right? It does potentially have more stats on its body because of its ongoing text as well. So good Mobius deck, that's one. And I think the second thing that you mentioned, I think which is what makes Thanos, not just for you, but I think for any player, to generally good player, is that your score was what, 41 and 13, right? Something like
Something
you said
like that. Yeah, it was pretty gross.
That just means that this deck is generally consistent. You don't need to retreat a lot. You open well on average. You draw good cards on average. The deck plays good cards on average. Like 41 and 13, I would say is very good of a scoreline. And like at the end of the day, it just shows that the deck doesn't give you many bad hands. Like, there's not many scenarios where the deck cannot play because it just draws bad. Like, the deck can obviously play like its normal game plan, and then once in a while you retreat. But like on average, you are not retreating because your hands are just good. You know, you just get to do good things. So I think that's one thing that ongoing Thanos has for it right now. Like, it has consistency in terms of like draws and the stones to play in the early game. You have explosive power in like the Mockingbirds, and then obviously the Goliath is also like a scaler that's really huge. And then you can play tech cards that are supported by the Spectrum, which also adds stats. So I think like the deck kind of just does everything right now. Like it basically does everything, and I think that is the main reason why it's insanely strong right now.
One underrated thing I want to mention is just how much of an all-star Goliath is. Like, being a 2-cost that wants to be in this deck makes you a better Wiccan deck. B, it's like half of a Spectrum. You're talking about Mobius having extra points, and it does because of Blue Marvel and Spectrum, but it also effectively does if you have a Goliath, right? Like, this is a card that just by virtue of being an ongoing, if you have Goliath on the board, oh, it's a 3/4 instead. Like, that kind of stuff really matters. Like, Goliath is effectively adding an extra point to a lot of your stones. 3 of your stones have ongoing abilities, effectively making extra points there. And there's just like so many situations where, like, even if you draw no stones, what you end up doing is like a fairly coherently powerful ongoing Spectrum game. You can just do that, right? Like, you could just play your like Sam Wilson into Speed, into just some other guys, and it's like, oh wait, I can just win games by playing reasonable cards, and that's when I'm not nutting off. That's when I'm not playing the Mind Stone and playing Wiccan and all of that stuff. That's my normal, that's the worst draw in the deck, basically, is like you're playing some reasonable ongoing cards. It's a very powerful place to be putting yourself in.
Yeah, I need to add one more thing as well, because I think it's also, like you said Goliath is underrated, but I think Goliath is also underrated. I mean, it's basically further adding on to your point, which is basically the point where you said that Goliath is a 2-drop that you actually want to play on curve in Thanos to trigger the Wiccan. I think it's super important because the 2-drops in the past weren't really optimal to play on curve. There was that Shadow King period which you never wanted to slam. And people might argue that, oh, why not just play 2 1-cost stones on turn 2? Getting 1-cost stone on turn 1 and 2 1-cost stones on turn 2 is actually not exactly very easy to get very often. So just having a tool that you can use to just slam and play and fill the curve and not feel bad about, I think it's also one thing that Goliath has that's really good for it, going for it.
The other dynamic with Thanos that like this sort of branches into, and I'll try not to diverge too heavily here, but it's a really important one, is the higher the card quality gets on your cheap cards, the easier it is to be a Wiccan deck. Because Thanos wants to weave in your stones, right? So having a bunch of really solid 2s, Sam, Goliath, Dazzler, you get your stone on 1, you get a 2-drop on 2. You get a 2 and a stone on 3. Like, the better you are at playing lots of power for small amounts of energy, the better you are at being a Thanos deck. And a large part of why the Thanos deck is as good as it is right now is because it has gotten Captain America Sam Wilson, and it has gotten Goliath, and that's exactly what a Thanos deck needs to succeed. It's not a coincidence that the other Thanos deck came back right as we got Strange Supreme, another 2-drop. The 2-drops, their quality are so important to these Thanos decks, and getting additional drops for them because Thanos cares so much about weaving those stones in, it matters a ton when those get upgrades. I wanted to talk a little bit about good metagames, because I kind of think we've been in one for a while, but I did notice when I was doing my tier list that it was pretty similar to the tier list I've been doing since Goliath released. Thanos and Scream and Ajax and maybe a little bit of, some cool other things happening like Clog or whatever. There are decks that have fallen off of the top tier, Discard for example. But what does it mean coming from another card game for a metagame to be good? Because I've got a theory that Marvel Snap players aren't really able to perceive what makes a metagame good, and instead judge the fun they are having by, is it different? A higher focus on novelty in this game than I've noticed in any other card game, in large part perhaps because of the balanced cadence. As a former Hearthstone Grandmaster, what's your opinion on that concept?
So, I don't think that's the universally correct answer, but I know my answer. So my answer for this has been the same for a very long time, which is I think, firstly, at the end of the day, a good meta it's kind of interesting. A good meta needs to have best decks. That's one thing. Like you need to satisfy the players that want to try hard and grind. You need best decks so that people can know what to play. But at the same time, you cannot have best decks that are unbeatable. You cannot have best decks that are totally uncounterable and uninteractable. So I think right now, like in Marvel Snap, it's kind of nice because like the best deck Thanos is very, I wouldn't say easy, but it's definitely you can interact with, right? You can play tech cards for it. You can play Klong, you can play Monger, you can play like other things. But like the best deck is very easy to interact with. At the same time, there's also a lot of variations of ways of playing the best deck. I mean, I wouldn't say like 2 ways is a lot in general, but in Marvel Snap, 2 ways to play Thanos, like playing ongoing and playing like the Strange Supreme one. That's decent, to play one deck, because there's like it's a 12 card deck, come on. But like at the end of the day, I also think that having a decent amount of variety at the top is also quite important, right? Thanos best deck, yes, but what is second best? What is third best? It's not like super defined. There's a lot of things that can just be played and can also beat Thanos. Or you can just play them. You can play like early scalers, tech package, like so-called quote-unquote old school silky smooth stuff with the new batroc and whatever. You can play Clock to a certain extent because it's sort of okay into Thanos, You can still play your the wonky bullseye thing that just never dies. Like for example, like my point is that you can play anything to a certain extent and not feel horrible into the best decks in the game. I think that's a healthy and good meta for me in general.
Good news to the Lamby believers. He might not be washed for much longer. You want to take this one?
All right, all right. So I'm glad that KM let me have this topic to talk about the fact that recently I guess you guys have seen as well that they announced that there might be some like public tournaments and stuff like that for Marvel Snap. I have no other information about this, but the thing is when I saw that I was very excited because one of the reasons why one of my biggest complaints was that Marvel Snap never really did anything fully competitive for like the public officially, you know. So now there's a chance that this is gonna be something like decent, you know, in terms of maybe there's a prize pool, maybe there's a big enough like a player participation, and we get like a semi super small competitive Marvel Snap scene. And yeah, that's very enticing to me, you know, because I enjoyed my time streaming Marvel Snap almost every day because that was where I built my most fun community per se. But then obviously the thing that didn't keep me going was the fact that competition was a bit non-existent. It was all third party and stuff like that. So now that there is a chance that we get some official tournament thing, and maybe if it does well, and then they do a bit more, I wouldn't say it's like gonna be like I don't have my expectations super high, but at least like they're looking at it. You know, they're looking at like maybe we should put some like tournaments officially from Marvel Snap, and that's something that I know for sure a lot of like the old tryhards like myself, I guess I'll name random names, the Human Spider, Torikun, KJB, all these people that you haven't heard of in a year. Like I think these people
Only one
they're
year?
my kind. Also, yeah. But like they love tournaments as well, and maybe they'll be back. I think this official tournament thing would bring back a lot of old familiar names that you were used to seeing on the ladder. Just because they thrive and they desire for competition. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that as well, because I know I am.
I think it'll be a really interesting sort of test case because, like, if I know anything about when companies do stuff like this, the answer for will there be more of these is basically always like, unless there's like an
Based on the
ideologue
first
pushing
one.
it. Yeah, it's like how's it gonna go,
Based
right?
on the
Like,
first one.
yeah, like, is it gonna go well? Is it gonna do what they want? What metrics are they looking at? Will it succeed on those metrics? Stuff like that. So obviously, like, I'm hopeful. I think it could be a really good thing for the Marvel Snap community. I think it's like a very solid thing for everyone to be involved in. It's just weird, right? Because when you think about Marvel Snap as a game, the few things that defined it were like unique collections and no
Fast.
competitive scene. And it's like, and
Yeah,
here we
and
are
fast.
now, where it's been a couple years, and now it kind of looks like the opposite of those two things are happening. It's very,
Do
very
they finally care
interesting.
about us, Kim? Do they finally care about the one, not even one, the 0.1%?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they always care. They always care. But like,
They finally care about the 0%.
0.01% actually.
Thank you so much for watching. Welcome back, Lamby, to 8 Cubes. We have been the 0%, and he's going to take us out.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.